Hey everybody, Matthew Stapley here, back for part 2 of what happens at the moment of our passing. And I want to talk a little bit today about a few different things. So the first thing that I actually want to talk about is the idea of our animals when they pass away. We actually form a very, very profound bond with animals, and we learn to communicate with them differently than we communicate with people, for example, because they have different styles of communication. And so through the process of getting to know them at that deep level, we do form a different kind of bond with them, and it's 100% normal to deeply grieve the loss of a furry loved one. So that's a very, very important thing. You know, we have a very different, very intimate connection with our animals in terms of physical contact. The mutual support and understanding that we have with them is different than other people. The non-judgment factor, you know, our animals and pets don't judge us, or we don't feel judged by them. And so because of all of that, we do form very, very different bonds with them, and it is normal to go through the grief process. Our loved ones, whether they be fur covered or not, are always at peace the moment of their passing, instantaneously in heaven at the moment of their passing, and they are always, always around us. So the big question that I get asked is, will I see my dog or my bird or my fish or my hamster someday? The answer is always a resounding yes. And I have had a lot of animals come forward in readings that I've done for people. So I do know that it's absolutely a thing. The second thing I want to talk about is the idea of ancestral spirits. So these are people that we are linked to through our genetics or through our family lineage, even if we did not know them on earth. And I have had that happen where a loved one has come through for somebody as a loved one, but they didn't actually know them. And one of the first times it ever happened, I was describing this woman that came forward for the person I was reading, and it was this really in-depth, detailed description, including a big historical thing that they were a part of and that their name was in a history book and all this stuff. And the person I was reading for said, no, like that doesn't make sense, nobody in my family like that. And then a few months later I got a phone call from this person, and they said, you're never going to believe it, but I talked to my family, I did some research, I found the person that you were talking about. She was in fact a loved one, and I'm on my way now to this historical society event to hear more about her because they're doing a presentation on her. And so that was something as well that happened that was very cool. So our ancestral spirits guide us, especially I've noticed it with people that are actively aware of psychic ability, healing ability, strong intuition, other spiritual mediumistic gifts. I have noticed that, you know, great grandma from a million years ago can step forward to say that this is something that runs in the family, and I have seen that happen a few times. And so that is a little bit about ancestral spirits. Now, the other things I want to talk a little bit about are visitations. How do we know when it's truly our loved one coming forward versus a figment of our imagination? And in the example of dreams, which is not the only kind of visitation, but in the example of dream visitations, people often report that they feel when they wake up that they can still feel that person's touch, or it was so real that they still feel like they're there beside them. The other thing that's common with visitations versus dreams is visitations don't usually fade from our memory over time, but dreams do. So we do, over, you know, hours, days, weeks, months, years, our dreams become more obscure. We don't really usually remember them as much. A visitation will be crystal clear all the way through. And we talked a little bit in the last video that sometimes people don't get visitations because the grief energy is so dense, but when you do, you'll know it because you will really feel like that's a strong, strong imprint left on you. The other thing is that visitations don't have to be in dreams. Sometimes we just feel a presence out of nowhere. We know who it is. Other times we'll get a song on the radio that was the person's favorite song, and it will happen the moment that we had just been thinking about them. You know, all of those are examples of visitations. When you just sense your loved one, whether you can feel it or just know it for a second, or they just pop into your head, to me, those are all examples of visitations. Okay, there's many, many, many ways that spirit will send us signs and communicate with us after the passing. The other thing I want to talk about is the dreams people have when they're hard dreams or weird dreams, and they feel like their loved ones are mad at them. And there are are so many people that have experienced that, and I was one of them. Actually, after the passing of a loved one, I kept having dreams that they were angry at me, and so I had to ask Spirit, what is this about? If everyone's at peace, why does this person look pissed off at me? And the message that I got is that in somebody's grief process, we have to process all of our own self-judgments, our things that we have to forgive, whether we did them or not. There's a lot of times where people feel bad for things that they shouldn't. And I think hindsight is 20/20. If we say, well, I wasn't there when Grandma Edna passed away because I was doing this instead and I feel guilty about it, in the present, we can look back and say, okay, well, why couldn't I have been there? It should have been easy. But what we forget is at the time Grandma Edna was passing away, you were busy. There was no transportation. You couldn't. Emotionally, it was too hard. Whatever the situation was, you just couldn't. And so please know that Spirit is cool with it always. I've never had anyone come forward saying they were upset. And to understanding and be compassionate to yourself that even in the moment of somebody's passing, the grief can already be setting in, the anxiety and stress can be already setting in. But we often do process that after the person passes away. And so when you have dreams or ideas where the person's angry at you, where they're upset, where it brings up guilty feelings, know that that is your grief process. That is not the person coming forward. Nobody's ever angry. I've even had a loved one come forward for somebody holding hands with the murderer that killed them to talk about forgiveness. Okay, so I know that if somebody can be cool and chill in spirit when that happens, then I think there's great reason to believe that whatever you feel you've done, you either haven't, or if you did, the feelings of them being angry at you are just things that you have to process, okay? So please be kind to yourself, very important. The next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about has a trigger warning on it. So you can look in the description of the video if you are sensitive about the subject that we're going to talk about, which is listed in the description. I will give you 5 seconds or so to turn off the recording, and I'll catch you in our next video together. So yes, you can turn that off now if you need to. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is a very sensitive subject. First of all, we're going to talk about miscarriages and ended pregnancies, because this is another question that I get a whole lot. If I miscarried, if I had a child for, a short amount of time but they never were born, are they still a loved one? Are they still with me? And I've had a lot of people ask if they had ended a pregnancy on purpose for whatever reason, whether it was medically necessary, whether it was emotionally necessary, mentally necessary, family situation necessary, love life necessary, whatever it was. Are they a loved one? Are they still around me? I've brought through both kinds of spirits, the kind that were miscarried and the kind that were ended, the pregnancy was ended. And so please know that you have every single right to grieve, even if you ended your pregnancy, okay? It is still emotional connection. Whether you're grieving immediately after or whether you're grieving 20 years later, know that it's very, very important to honor that process, okay? Grief can come at any moment for anything in our lives. It doesn't even have to be a death or a loss. It can be a job change, an end of a relationship, a life transition. Everybody has a right to experience, express, and feel their grief. The only thing that you have a responsibility for is doing so in kindness to yourself, kindness to those around you, and with respect and loyalty to yourself in the process, okay? So I know people have felt bad when they've ended a pregnancy and they feel like they shouldn't have a right to feel grief or sadness, and that's just not true. You can feel grief or sadness for a million reasons, okay? And all of it is okay. All of it is okay. With miscarriages and stillbirths, your loved ones are still with you. They are in no way an exception to the rule, and I've had lots come through in readings, and I've heard of lots of stories of visitations from angel babies, as they're called commonly, and just know that they are with you. You will see them again. We don't always understand the reasons for life and death, especially when it feels like that life ended so soon. It can be hard to understand, and one thing that has always come through over and over and over again is there was a reason. That soul had to touch with you in this life for a reason. And this is true for all souls, whether we had great relationships with them or not, whether we get visitations from them or not, whether we have our own guilt to work through as a part of our grief or not. They are always around us, always with us, always supporting us, loving us, guiding us, and that is what Spirit has always brought through. So I'll leave you guys with that. I'll see you in our next video, hopefully sometime soon, and much love to every single one of you, whether you are just crawling into bed, whether you are just having your morning coffee, whether you're somewhere in noonish. Please know that I'm wishing you a very, very wonderful rest of your day, and may the healing power of Spirit always be with you. Take care.